All right, if we can get everybody to take their seats. I was just commenting to somebody that I'm actually here on time today, but now I'm actually starting the class late, so I don't know what the problem, I guess, is. I want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day, especially the moms in here. Happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day, especially. I got the greatest mom in the room, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but she's sitting back there, so she's a lovely woman. We are starting a new series this month, the month of May, and it's going to be on suffering and lament, and learning how to lament well. I was just thinking this morning, this has no correlation to the last session, because we're calibrating our conscience, we are not lamenting or suffering now, so don't think that there's a correlation, but I'm going to start out every week with a little bit of a video of me interviewing a different family or a different person that's gone through deep trials, that's gone through deep suffering, and just getting their perspective, getting their insights into how they've suffered and how they've lamented, how they've dealt with it, how they've struggled with the Lord on it, and how they've come out on the other side. And so this first one is from Josh and Jesse Firthmeyer. I don't know how many of you all know them, but you'll get to be introduced to them with this short video. So Chris, if you could get that ready, and I'll go ahead and play that, and I'll be up in just a minute.
Hi, I'm Josh Firthmeyer.
And I'm Jesse Firthmeyer.
From foster care, working with troubled youth, to dealing with illness and cancer. And
So in August of, what was it, 2018?
August of 2018, I was diagnosed with cancer.
And at that point we had just gotten 3 new children placed with us, so we'd only had them for a few weeks at that time. And so I call him and he's very nonchalant about it. Yeah, the doctor said it's cancer. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Well, we had just found out a few weeks prior that we were pregnant after infertility for 9 years. And so we've been told we weren't having any more kids, and I had just quit my job to do foster care more full time, and so here we are, we have this baby on the way, no insurance, these kids just got dropped off at our house, and we get this bomb of cancer, and I don't know, my heart started racing. Like, I had never experienced anything like that before, but I couldn't breathe. I was just like, oh my word, what if my husband's not here to help me with this baby? Like, this is insane. Like, God, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand. So we watched it, and then all of a sudden, we got a scan and it had grown a little bit, and it was just like, we need to have surgery now. And it was just kind of like, wait, we were watching this, like, here we are in this ministry.
We watched it for almost a year.
Yeah, we're in this ministry, we're doing this stuff, we just got these kids, I don't know, it was very crazy. And so it was like life just kind of stopped for a minute. And so we were working at the ranch. We had given 6 years of our lives at the boys' ranch. We loved what we did. And with the surgery, we found out that we didn't know what was going to happen, because he may not be able to walk again. We didn't know, with it being that close to the spine and the nerves, we just didn't know what to expect. And so, kind of just trying to prepare for what's going to happen. I was a little stressed. I was very stressed about it, let's be honest. Just not knowing what to expect. But God he showed himself through it. And now that I look back, I'm like, okay, he was guiding and directing through all of those steps. It totally makes sense. But in the time, it's just like, I don't even know what's true anymore. Like, I just don't know what to think.
Physical trials have been kind of a staple in our marriage, because before the cancer I had 2 back surgeries, which was long-lasting, enduring pain, and so we didn't know what to do, and we went for probably 7 months of trying to live. Pain to where, just unimaginable pain. And then dealing with, the ministry aspect of things, there's definitely been some hardships. And I think the hardest one's been foster care.
it took us 3 years to have Eli, and then we had a miscarriage shortly after that. And then it was just kind of like I found out that I had some different polycystic ovary syndrome and endometriosis and some different things that were definitely not in my favor to have children again. And so I prayed and prayed, you know, that God would provide us with children. And I honestly, now that I look back, I definitely understand it, because we would have never gotten into foster care if we would have had our own children. There were a lot of times where, you know, I went from having a 5-year-old to having a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old, and then we got 3 more kids brought to us that I was hoping we would be able to adopt someday. And then, so 5 kids, you know, and he's gone most of the time. And it's just like, what was I thinking? Like, I don't know. But I knew that that's what God wanted us to do, to just help these children and to provide a home for them.
With him and other foster children, we've had probably 20 plus,
We had 30 something.
30 plus kids in our home.
Person.
And that's not even kids working at the ranch, troubled youth. So 30 plus kids in our home. So having them leave is a lot of heartache.
One of the only positions he could get comfortable in was on his knees, laying on the couch, like up with his body on the couch, but on his knees. And he used to call it, well, I gotta go get into my prayer position because I can't function anymore right now. And he spent a lot of time crying out to God. And I think God really used that in his life to bring him to him and just comfort him and strengthen him. And it was really neat for me to see, even though it was heart-wrenching for me to watch. Like, I knew that this pain was drawing him closer to God, and it didn't make, I mean, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but it's just like, why did we have to do it this way? But okay, you know, like, at least he's growing closer to God through that.
To be at a point physically where you're in so much anguish where you can do nothing except cry out to God. And so, yeah, definitely like crying out in anger to God, like, and asking the questions of why me, why this much pain, and then just reverting to, please just take it away, to, okay, Lord, help me find rest in you, help me get through this moment so I can have enough energy and strength to go through the next.
But God was very much in it, even though in my heart I was like, God, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, I was very frustrated, I guess, and like, I know God's good, and I knew that, you know, in my heart, but it was just kind of like, I don't know what you're doing here. Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, we're in this ministry, we're doing good things. Why do we have to leave? But sometimes I would just tell myself that, like, I don't understand this, but God is good, and I know He's good, and I know He's going to make good on His promises. And then just, just bringing to life, you've got to trust in me, and I will direct your path. I'm going to, you know, show you where I want you to be, and I'm going to use this to get you there. And it may not have been how we chose it, but, you know, a lot of times you say that, oh yeah, God's going to work it out, but do you really believe that? And, you know, He has. And we're not, obviously, we're cancer free right now, but it could change in the future, and that doesn't mean that God's not good. It just, you know, means that His plan is different than what we thought.
No, it definitely drew me nearer. I think some of the best moments I've had with the Lord is when I'm anguished in pain and just going through physical trials, or even with, you know, heartache with foster kids. And now sometimes I feel far off because it's just, sometimes it's unrelenting and it doesn't go away. But even when I feel far off, I feel like it's drawing me to God.
You know, He drew closer to God, and in some ways I was like farther away for a while, just being frustrated and angry and like, why is this happening? Like, we're serving you, it doesn't make sense. Like, we're in this ministry and we're helping these kids, and we've given you everything. We sold our house and we moved, and, you know, why are we going back now? And why, you know, I don't know. But now that I look back, I'm like, okay, God was drawing me near, but I wasn't drawing near to Him. He was pulling me, you know, because I'm like kicking and screaming like, oh.
On our way to taking the kids or running an errand early in the morning, dropped off a bag of muffins like 3 dozen muffins, which is awesome. They just, hey, we're taking the kids. Okay, when today after church,
we're gonna go take them out to eat.
Grab them and they're gonna come hang out with us.
Yeah.
Sweet. Hey, I'm coming tomorrow. We have a crew coming. We're gonna paint your house and get it ready. And I mean, there's no questions. There wasn't us asking. They saw the need. They came. They filled the need, and was happy to do it. So I would say, like, don't wait for something. Don't say, well, let me know if you need anything. Like, if you see they need their lawn mowed or something done, like, go help them do it.
And I'm not the kind of person that asks for help. So like, people ask me, do you need something? Is there anything we can do? I'm like, oh, we're fine. We're not fine, but that's just my response. I don't want to bother anybody to help me with anything. And so for people to just step up and say, I'm going to come help you do this, regardless of whether you want me to or not, that was very helpful. To know that someone was thinking of us outside of, oh, hey, how's it going when you come into church in the morning? Because I haven't had that in a while. Just for people to say, hey, I'm praying for you, and like really mean it, because they tell me that like every day. And it's like, hey, I prayed for you this morning, this is what I said, and that was really helpful too. Or just being there. Hey, I'm gonna come to your house and just sit with you today, because I know you're struggling or whatever. Those types of things definitely are helpful.
And just taking them and by the hand and praying, just saying, hey, I want to pray for you real quick.
So hopefully that was a helpful story to see someone who has gone through suffering and their perspective, what they've learned, what God has taught them, and how they lamented, what their prayers looked like. So every week, when we go through this, I'll have a different person that will show an interview of, and so it'll be a blessing to you. So you might be wondering at this point, why are we doing a series on suffering and lament? Well, a few reasons. First, because the elders asked me to do it. So usually if they ask me to do something, I'm not going to question it. So they asked me to, and I think that it's because there's a lot of families in the church recently who have gone through suffering, gone through trials, gone through crisis, and within our body. And so there needs to be a teaching on how to lament well. The year that we've had, right? 2020 was a year of trials, was one of, for a lot of people, lamenting. Why are we going through this? Our lives are upended. It's a call for an endurance of the saints. Another reason is our culture has a lot of inadequacies when it comes to dealing with suffering. Right? So anthropologists, sociologists have said that the American 21st century culture is one of the worst cultures in history at dealing with suffering. When they've studied people groups from across history and across the world today, they've said that America deals with it the worst. And you're thinking, well, but that doesn't make any sense because we have all these counselors and we have all these sessions and we have so much teaching, we have so many books out there on this. How can we be at the worst at this? Why are we so bad at it? Well, I think it has to do with a lot of how we view society. We think America was built on the pursuit of happiness. So when something bad happens to us, we're thinking, what? Something's wrong here. This is not how life should be. But cultures across time and history and across the world realize that suffering is a part of life. You can't evade suffering. You can't a life of happiness for a lot of people just doesn't exist. So to say, oh yeah, I'm going through suffering, of course I'm going through suffering. Of course bad things are happening to me. We live in a world of this. But for some reason we try to shelter ourselves to think that this doesn't exist. And then when it does exist, we're like, we're confused. No, this doesn't make any sense. I'm supposed to be living a life of happiness, a life of joy, a life where there's no suffering. There was, in fact, as I was studying this exact topic in my study here, there was some children running around, and they were coming into my study, and kind of joking with me and kind of a little bit of torturing with me, and I was pretending that I was crying. I was like, I was crying like that. And they said, "You're not crying." And I said, "How do you know I'm not crying?" "Well, because you're a parent, and parents don't cry." So that just shows you the even in a small child, like we don't deal with suffering real well. Like we don't deal with, she doesn't really see parents as crying. No, kids only cry. Parents cry too. We can show our children crying is okay. And then and another reason, and this just might be because I am a cross-cultural worker, but because it's for the sake of the gospel. We need to know how to suffer and lament for the sake of the mission. For the sake of you probably get tired of me saying that, but it's for the sake of the gospel. A lot of people, they think that suffering and this kind of thing, that's the problem of evil is a problem for Christianity, that we have to try to explain that away, that it's a hurdle for some people to come to faith. Have you heard that before? That because there's a problem, like because evil exists, that's a problem for me to accepting that God exists. Have you heard that before? Yes, no, maybe, yeah. So the enemy is smarter than we give him credit for, I think. Because if we suffer well, if we lament well, then the problem of evil is not really a problem for Christianity. And the reason why I say that is because historians have said that the early church, one of their biggest strengths is answering this problem of suffering. They suffered really well, and that was a big proponent for the expansion of Christianity. People saw, wow, these people who follow Christ, like they suffer really well, like they deal with it really well. Like I want some of that, right? And so it affects our mission. It affects the way we interact with the lost. So where are we going this month? What are we doing? Well, I like to always give you guys a roadmap. So this will be like I said, it's going to be 5 sessions. The first one, today we're going to look at just an understanding of what lament is. And then they'll have 2 sessions on the practice of lament, where we go through the Psalms on one week, and then another one will go through the Book of Lamentations on that. And then the third is, it would be the 4th session. It's a session on the hope of lament. What is the hope in this whole thing? Why are we doing this? And what is going to be the end result of lament? And then finally, the 5th session is going to be a community of lamenters. So how do we lament well as a church? How do we come alongside those who are going through suffering? How do we come alongside them and minister to them and really give good counsel and good just grieving with them? How do we not be like Job's friends, basically? Or how can we be? What are some good redeeming qualities of Job's friends and coming alongside people that are there? We saw at the end of the video, the Firthmeyer is just kind of giving ways in which the church has come alongside them. So that's kind of where we're going on that final session. So some of the goals that I have in this series is for you to gain an understanding of lament, to really embrace lament, to really accept it, to want it, and to learn how to practice it, to learn how to do it. If you guys, I was going to bring my copy, but I forgot my copy, of Mark Vroegop is the author, and he wrote a book called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. And that we had it on sale at the bookstore for a while, and I know that a number of copies went out to the church body. And so I'm going to be using that book pretty extensively. I'm not going to be using it like I did with the Conscience series book, but where it's methodically going through it, but just kind of taking some snippets from him. And so if you want that resource, just come and ask me, and I can get some more ordered. I don't want to just order some and then nobody buys them. So because we've already bought, those who do read will have already bought them when we had those on sale a couple years ago. But if you want that book and want to go deeper on this idea of lament, just come and ask me, and I'll get you some copies. Another thing I want to say, and just in introducing this, is just to be transparent with you and my own struggles with why the elders asked me to teach this. I feel like I haven't gone through a whole lot of suffering, and as I look across this room even, and knowing some of your guys' lives and what you've been through, For me to be up here to teach this session seems almost pretentious. Like I'm going to tell you something you don't already know, or who are you to say this to me? What have you gone through? And so I just want to put that out there in transparency and all honesty, I feel some inadequacies in myself, and to teach you all this kind of content. But just take the content for what it is, and don't necessarily have it coming from me, but coming from the Word of God, and from those who have gone before us in seeing lament and at doing well. The format of this series is going to be the same thing. Like I said, we're going to see a video, and then we're going to have some teaching, and then we're all going to pray together, and just kind of doing the practice of lament together as a community. So let's get on to this session, which is understanding lament. There's different kinds of suffering. We have childhood experiences, we have cancer, addictions, loneliness, failed marriages, debilitating pain, deteriorating bodies, death, being the caretaker of others, the consequences of our own sin. You look at David, you look at Jonah, and seeing their suffering and their trials being the consequence of their sin. We see suffering can come through being sinned against. Somebody like Joseph was sinned against, and so he had to go through his trials. We can have all that mixed together into one bag, like Job, where it seems like death and suffering and pain and all of that being taken away. It's all coming together at once, right? So there's all different kinds of suffering. And there's a whole different kinds of responses to suffering that we have, don't we? So one is that we can try to avoid it, right? Doing everything possible to evade suffering, to avoid the hard things in life, to not wanting to take risks, building a wall around us, perhaps, to try to avoid any sort of suffering. Another response would be to deny it, to think it doesn't exist. What's suffering? This is nothing. I haven't gone through suffering. I don't suffer at all. Paul would say, this light and momentary affliction is nothing compared to the glory that is to be revealed. Was he denying his suffering that he has? I think that you'll see that's a common refrain with some of the interviews that I've done is I haven't really gone through suffering. This is nothing compared to others that I've seen. And so we try to deny what we've gone through. And then we can also just despair of it. We can go through suffering and it would just debilitate us. Like we just think it's always going to be like this. I'll never get through this. Suffering is traumatic for us. Especially, I think it's traumatic when it happens. There's confusion when it happens. And I said a lot of this happens because of our culture and the way that we pursue happiness. And I think also in the church, it's confusing and it's frustrating. And I think a little bit has to do with our own subtle pursuit of the prosperity gospel. Now, you might throw arrows at me saying, no, I reject, and that is a terrible heresy, the prosperity gospel. But it subtly comes in to our minds when we think, no, this is not supposed to be the Christian life. God is supposed to be blessing me. Why is this happening to me? Isn't that what the prosperity gospel says? No, God is supposed to prosper you. He's supposed to make you succeed, not to bring you through these things. But this is the normal part of the Christian life. It is, I'll just give you some quotes here so you won't hear it from me. Martin Lloyd-Jones says, "Grief and sorrow are something to which the Christian is subject, and the absence of a feeling of grief is unnatural. It goes beyond the New Testament and savors more of the stoic or psychological states produced by a cult rather than by Christianity." When we don't grieve, when we don't lament well, when we think that suffering is some kind of an abnormal part, that's not Christianity. N.T. Wright says, "It is no part of the Christian faith to be able to explain what's happening and why." So for those who want to deny it, he says, "In fact, it is a part of the faith to not be able to explain and to lament instead. As the Spirit laments within us, so we become small shrines where the presence and healing love of God can dwell. Another powerful quote. Now, Luther, he also has a great view of suffering. And so I put his quotes here on the board. So for those who want to avoid suffering, hear what Martin Luther says. He says, "Suffering dispels the illusion that we have the strength and competence to rule our own lives and save ourselves. People become nothing through suffering so they can be filled with God and His grace. It's God's nature to make something out of nothing. Hence, one who is not yet nothing, out of him God cannot make anything." He says, for those who despair in suffering, therefore God accepts only the forsaken, cures only the sick, gives sight only to the blind, restores life only to the dead, sanctifies only the sinners, gives wisdom only to the unwise. In short, He has mercy on only those who are wretched. Wouldn't that cause us now to embrace suffering? You heard in the Firth-Myers story that this is not how they would have imagined it. They wouldn't want it in a million years, but it was through that God drew closer to them, and God taught them, and God used it to enhance their faith. It's confusing. It seems like that would be the opposite, but God usually does the opposite than what we think. In fact, there is one author who calls it the insanity of God. We think that God is insane for doing it this way, but this is the way of His operation. So there's a tension here that we experience, isn't there? That suffering is a part of the Christian life, and it's a great testimony when we suffer well, but yet at the same time, suffering wasn't a part of God's good design. We must live underneath this tension that, yes, it's a part of our life, and yet it's not a part of His good creation. This is not... The Garden of Eden would be His perfect environment, and we don't live in that. So this is not what it's meant to be, but it is what it is today. So we have this tension, and this is where lament really comes in. And so I want to give a definition of lament. Lament is the honest cry of a hurting heart wrestling with the paradox of pain and the promise of God's sovereign goodness. That's a packed, impactful, loaded definition. So let me read it again. It is the honest cry, not a pretend cry, not just, let me just say words, but an honest cry of a hurting person, of a hurting heart, wrestling, trying to deal with this tension that I'm talking about here, this wrestling with the paradox of I'm going through such pain, such grieving, dealing with that, and yet the promise that God is authoritative, that He is good. How can I deal with this? How do I bring these two things together? And that's you going to God and saying, I can't do this, and so you have to explain this to me. The Bible is full of suffering. It's full of brokenness. It's full of grief. It's full of struggles. And it's full of lamenters. Did you know that there's more lament songs in the Bible than praise songs? There is more than 65 laments in the Psalms alone. That's more than the praise psalms. Hannah, Moses, Job, Tamar, Jeremiah, Jesus are all known as famous lamenters in the Bible. So for those who think that lamenting is for the immature or the weak Christian, take that out of your mind. The mature Christian is the one who's going to lament well, to say, Lord, why is this happening? How long, oh Lord, are you going to go through this? How long are you going to allow me to go through this? Why are you allowing this to happen? Where are you, oh Lord? And there's a uniqueness, I think, in the Christian lament, because suffering is not we don't have the market cornered on grieving. Christians don't have the market cornered. We're not the only ones who grieve. We're not the only ones who go through trials. And yet, what is distinct about the Christian lament? Well, one is we're going to the God whom we serve. See, everyone is worshiping. Everyone serves a God. Now, they might not believe in God, but they're serving some sort of a God, whether it's family, whether it's a passion of theirs, whether it's a hobby, whether it's their careers. They're pursuing some kind of an idol, some kind of a God. And when we lament, when we turn to the living God, that's a distinct Christian value. Disciples of Jesus lament because they know that God is sovereign and they know that He is good. We believe in God's power to deliver, that the tomb is empty and that Jesus is alive. We know the ending to the story and that the hope we have of eternity with Jesus. So we can cry out, "How long, O Lord?" We can cry out that to Him because we know the ending from the beginning. We know what's going to happen. So you say, "How long? This is not how it's meant to be. We know what it's supposed to be. So how long will you wait? How long must I be patient for you to make it all right again?" And yet we try to avoid lament, right? We think that there's something wrong in asking these questions. There's somehow thinking, well, if I ask these questions now, we're going into doubt, and doubt is wrong. There's doubting Thomas, right? We don't want to be that guy. Or we might think that we're blaspheming God's work. We focus on the sovereignty of God, that God is in control, that God has led us through these things, and He's going to bring them all out for good. And so we focus on that. So if I were to say, well, no, why are you allowing me to do this? We think that we are blaspheming the work of God in our lives. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's just an honest. He already knows what's going on in your mind. Why don't you just cry it out to Him? Don't try to stifle it and say, oh, that's not really there, Lord. He knows it's there. So just open that can and bring it before Him. Aren't we supposed to count it all joy to be in trials? Yes. But once you go through lament, joy comes at the end. You will rejoice and you'll have a lot more joy when you've gone through a season of lament, of crying out to the Lord and saying, Lord, why is this happening? And then you end in trust. And then you say, yeah, God is good. Yes, God is working in this. Yes, He is sovereign. He is King. And then I can have joy. But don't manufacture the joy without going through. And you manufacture it by not going through lamenting well. So why the need for lament? That's a cute little picture of Gail, by the way. So and I know we're having a heavy topic, so I wanted to get a little nice picture of Gail looking out across the Himalayas, actually, so for your own amusement. So why the need for lament? Well, first, it's a growing immaturity. You might be thinking, well, that seems like the opposite, that if I'm mature, then I wouldn't have to lament. I would just have joy in trials. No. Spiritual maturity is not lamenting less, but better lamenters who have a greater sense of their need of God and their need for God. Another reason we need to lament is it's a language to talk to God in our suffering. Feel free to complain to Him, and complaining in a matter of trust, to say, Lord, I don't know what to say. Well, this is our language to talk to Him. It gives us grace. It gives us space to be messy in the trials. It gives us a space for that, to cry out those things, to break the silence maybe between you and the Lord. As you heard Jesse talk in the video earlier, that it seems like even though Josh was drawing near, I was going farther away. I was getting farther away from him. And sometimes that can happen in our trials, that it's like we don't want anything to do with him. And that's because we're not lamenting. We just want to, we want to, no, Lord, I don't understand. I'm just going to keep away from you. Well, if you don't understand, draw near to him through lament. It helps us process our feelings with our Maker, the one who has made our feelings, the one who has made these emotions. And it's a grace of God. It's a pathway to praise. It's a transition between pain and promise, because painful, honest prayers can actually turn into worship of him. And then some benefits, the benefits of a good lament. Well, it can help us process our grief. It'll be a counselor for us. It'll help us overcome bitterness. It facilitates confession when we're in sin. It helps us battle loneliness if that's part of your trials. And it helps keep the faith, keep trusting in him. So at this point you might be saying, well, that's all fine and good, but I don't know what lamenting is. I still don't know how to do that. I still don't know what the practice of lament looks like. Well, let me help you through some steps on that. And the first, there's two main questions that we want to ask when we lament is where are you, Lord? And why is this happening? Those are two major questions that we ask the Lord in lament. And when we do that, we go through these steps of how to lament. And in these next two sessions, the one when we go through the Psalms and then when we go through Lamentations, is actually Ron Rhodes who will help us go through the Psalms lament through these 4 steps, through each of the Psalms and through the book of Lamentations. Well, the first step is we have to turn to God. When we go to lament, we're not just crying out to whatever or crying out to friends or we're not crying out to our family. We are going and we are turning to the Lord. And we are facing him. We are saying, Lord, why is this happening? What are you doing? Where are you? We go to him. We don't go to anybody else or anywhere else. And the second is bring your complaint. So just tell him what it is. Tell him what you're going through, what those trials are. Just admit it to him face to face, what's going on in your mind, in your heart. Bring that confusion to him. He can handle it. He can handle what you have to say. He already knows what's going on in your mind. You might as well just say it to him verbally. The third thing is, now we're transitioning now. We're saying, okay, now I'm going to ask boldly of you. Take this away. You heard Josh say that, Lord. It went from why this to just take it away. Take away this pain. Ask boldly in the midst of it. Give me patience. Give me whatever. Do whatever you need to do through me. Ask very boldly. Don't just whatever is part of your plan, whatever is your will, I'll take it. Those are good and nice prayers, but just ask boldly in those moments. And then finally, choose to trust. End in faith. End in saying, yes, I know you're good. I know you will pull through this. I know you know you have the ending. You have the victory, Lord. To see this illustrated real fast, I want us to turn to Psalm 88, if you have your Bibles. Psalm 88, and you'll see here these 4 steps. And in fact, in a lot of these Psalms of lament, you'll find these 4 steps going through that. So I'm going to read through Psalm 88 and see how you can where you can identify these 4 steps. Psalm 88 is a psalm of the sons of Korah to the choir master according to the Mahalath Leanoth, a maskil of Heman the Ezrahite. It says, O Lord, God of my salvation, I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. You see him, he's turning to the Lord. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength. Like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. He feels like he hasn't He feels like the Lord has left him, like the Lord has cut him off. He's being an honest complaint before him. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy on me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Does that sound like a complaint? That almost, to me, when I read that, it almost sounds blasphemous. Like you're blaming God for what you're going through. But this is God's holy word. It's okay to bring your complaint to him, what you're feeling, what you're thinking God is doing to you. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape. My eye grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Did the departed rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me? Afflicted and close to death from my youth up, I suffer your terrors. I am helpless. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dreadful assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in on me together. You have caused my beloved and my friend to shun me. My companions have become darkness. Well, that didn't end as well as we had hoped. He's still on step 2, even at the end of that psalm. We don't get closure to where the psalmist ended. And sometimes that's going to be where you're at. Sometimes you're going to end in your prayer at this moment. Sometimes the darkness feels so overwhelming. And it shows that believers can stay in darkness for a while. You see where the psalmist here, he says, from my youth, I feel like I've been in darkness. Darkness can be overwhelming, like I said. So this psalm can teach us what a lament looks like, what a good lament looks like, what it looks like to be honest, to complain before him. And we'll look at other psalms later that'll end in trust, where it'll end in where we're going on these last few steps. But what I want to do now in these last 5 or 10 minutes is to have you all pray together, to have you all practice even some of these steps together. And I want to do this at the risk of maybe stepping on some toes here, but what I would like for you all to do is gather up in your small groups. So if you have a small group, to find those in the room that are a part of your small group. If you are not a part of a small group yet, which is fine, that's where I'm maybe stepping on toes, that's fine. I'm not like demanding that you be a part of a small group, and that's okay. But if you're not, we can gather on this side of the room over here if you do not have a small group, and we can pray together on it. The reason I'm doing that is because ideally, in small groups, people are going to know what your suffering is already. People know you. That's where you know people more intimately. And so you don't have to, and every week we're going to be doing this. So you don't have to pour out kind of your struggles and your sorrows and your grief to a whole new set of people every week. But it's the same people who know you and can pray for you every week. So if we can do that in these moments, and like I said, just share. You guys are going to know each other's lives being in a small group together, and so you're going to know what your guys' sufferings are, and so pray these things for one another. Spend a couple of minutes on just kind of where people are at, and then maybe one or two of you pray in this same way, turning to God, bringing your complaint before Him on what those sufferings are, and to ask boldly for those individuals, and then lastly, ending in trust. So if we can do that, disband. And then we won't come back after you're done with prayer, then we can all be dismissed.